So, one of the most powerful invisible contracts that young girls and young women, and then women, are sold and signed up to is the invisible contract of modesty. I certainly did receive it as a contract growing up. I grew up in a religion whereby modesty is spoken about very, very often. Okay. And, you know, you are made promises essentially about what being modest, specifically dressing in a modest manner, will give you or reward you in life. And so my understanding, or uh, the way I was taught modesty, was that it's not just about how you dress, of course, it's about how you speak, how much attention you seek and accept, how desirable you are, but you have to be meek and humble and lowly and unassuming. It was about how visible you allowed yourself to be. Don't be a show off. Don't draw attention to yourself. But overall, the message was very much the same. If you are modest enough, you will be safer. You will be accepted. You will belong, and you will be embraced. Okay, more respected, more valuable. Okay, more likely to be chosen by a man. Okay, the problem with all of that, of course, is that women eventually discover that those promises are not guarantees, and a lot of the time they're not true. And the reason why I think it's so important for us to talk about this as an invisible contract is that I see a lot of content, particularly from younger women these days, speaking about modesty. Okay. And usually it is attached to some kind of religious belief. Okay. Some kind of faith journey, whether they started there or they end up there. Okay. And they start talking about how they're changing the way they're dressing. It usually starts in relation to dress and grooming. And that is then the litmus test that they use to assess other people's spirituality, faith, and morality. And they obviously begin to judge themselves in that manner as well. Now, I don't want to make sweeping statements, but one thing I do know, having grown up in a religion and, been deep in it, right? We're not talking about it merely being something you do on a Sunday. This was an entire way of life, every aspect of your life, and this was the standard. Is that you'll find that a lot of the time, this seeking the emerging attention on modesty is often linked to being chosen. Okay, there are a lot of women who begin to dress modestly, and I'm not talking about the faith of Islam. I think it's related, but in this instance, in the statement I'm making now, I would say when you look at Christianity specifically, okay, when women revert or convert, etc., a lot of it, you can see the signs that it is often related to maybe how they were treated by men before, or the fact that they want a husband, or they want to position themselves in a way that means that they are chosen by a man, because they are signaling, at least on the external, that they are modest, okay, that they are a Christian woman that is therefore worthy and deserving of being chosen to be a wife. If you listen really carefully to a lot of women when they're talking about modesty, almost always there is some inclusion of how they are being perceived by men. Now, when I talk about this, there's a lot of pushback quite often, and it's astounding to me, and it shouldn't be really, that genuinely, of course, that women will say it has nothing to do with men. It does, okay? Even in the context of religion and how it is taught to women, there is a strong focus on how men perceive you, what men think of you, and whether you'll be chosen to be a man's wife. I'll never forget when I was growing up, there was an elder who was talking about the fact that when he was seeking a wife, you know, he would notice, for example, if a woman had more than one piercing in her ears, and I chuckled, of course, because look, I've got plenty of piercings, but he would see that, and to him that indicated a lack of modesty and a lack of spirituality. And this was being said amongst unmarried women, who, most of whom, except for me, were hankering to find a husband, right? And so often a lot of these modesty beliefs and ideas are inevitably linked to male attention, male appraisal, male validation, male selection, and male approval. And so the promise that is often sold to girls is that good men will respect you, okay? Because good women get respected when they're modest. Predatory men will leave you alone. We'll come back to that. You'll be viewed as wife material. You'll be taken more seriously when you're dressed modestly. God will approve, and you will be protected when you are more modest. And at this point, I'll also mention the fact that you do have a lot of men. I notice a lot of men online right now are talking about modesty. You see, there's that move towards what are considered to be traditional conservative values. Now, you have to listen carefully, because I always find it very fascinating when suddenly these terms that were typically traditionally used and understood in religious contexts are used by men who are not religious at all. Okay, so these are men who are not religious. They do not subscribe to a particular religion. They are not practicing in a particular religion. Okay, they barely read the Bible or any holy text themselves. Okay, because if they did, they would realize that modesty is not gendered, really. And actually, it goes beyond your dress and grooming, but we'll come back to that in a moment. And so you always have to listen very carefully when you hear, okay, men start to discuss modesty, men who really don't understand what they're talking about, but they're using it, and they're using the concept to control and contain women and essentially remind women that, hey, we matter. What a man thinks of you matters, and your deepest value, okay, and essence is being weighed up all of the time. And so modesty is just another thing in addition to all the other things that young girls and women are encouraged to focus on. And like I say, it's usually limited to dress and grooming, which is very interesting. Okay, very interesting. But here's why it's so attractive, because I want to go there first, because whenever I talk about this, often it is women who will push back on this. And I had one of the videos that I did, which went viral. There are a lot of women who are in the Islamic faith who said, well, actually, women who do not dress modestly do get harassed more. We need to look at facts and evidence here, okay? There are places in the world where women are covered from head to toe, where abuse still happens. Sexual harassment, sexual coercion, sexual assault. These things still happen to women who are covered head to toe. They still happen. They are not rare. They are not unique, and this is not a minority of cases. In addition to that, when you look at the evidence, the research, and the stats, I mean, there's an entire rape museum. And one of the things I find interesting about it is that they've displayed the things that women and girls and victims and survivors were wearing. There's nappies in that museum. We need to think about this. This is why I do not mince my words. Because of course this contract is attractive. Of course, young girls feel attached to the promises they've been made about what modesty will do for them in terms of safety. But the reality, the truth, remember we're always talking about invisible contracts, which is the gap between what you're told and the reality and the lived experience. And what we need to do as women and young girls is see the truth and the reality. Now, I'm not saying that it is not important, it is not valuable as a human being to decide how you want to present yourself, how you physically wish to clothe yourself. The reality is most of us, we live in places where we need to wear clothes when we leave the house. So of course, use your critical thinking. Deciding upon what your clothing will be, how you will present yourself, how you will dress is important. You get to decide that. So if you want to cover up more or less, it's your choice. That's the free will part. So I'm not pushing back on the concept, the idea of dress and grooming being modest fundamentally. What I'm saying is, one, it's a choice, and two, it does not guarantee. The promise you've been sold is empty. And I'm saying this as someone who dressed, and I mean, it's not the past tense, right? It's kind of normal to me. It's not a big deal, right? I dress appropriately for the context. I have made certain decisions about what parts of my body I would like to be visible and what parts not to be visible, depending upon the context. You know, if you catch me in Jamaica, which is my favorite place on the earth, I'm going to be on that beach. Okay. And yes, I like to sunbathe. But even within that, I make decisions about what I'm wearing, right? But that attire on the beach is not going to be appropriate in a professional setting. So use your critical thinking here. Use your critical thinking. But one thing I can tell you from lived experience, because sometimes I get men trying to be, funny in the comments. I came from a religion where there are clear rules as to what women can and cannot wear in worship. Okay, so I had to wear a dress or a skirt for every worship activity. So dressing modestly is water off a duck's back for me. Lived it, been there, done it. I can do it anytime. And like I say, most of the time I am dressed in what would be considered a modest manner. So I'm not speaking as somebody who doesn't know the game about this. All right. I know it very, very well. Very well. Okay. And so, of course, young girls are vulnerable. The world is an uncertain place. And so, when you buy into the contract that modesty will protect you and modesty keeps you safe, okay, it offers you some certainty. Okay. You're basically being told, do these things and you will be safe. You're told it's a simple formula. It's input, output, nothing in between. Okay. And of course, humans, young women in particular, they love safety. They love certainty, at least the promise of it. Okay. And when you're growing up in a religious and or a conservative environment, um, you want to be accepted. You want to be embraced. You do not want to be judged and assessed as dirty, unclean, rebellious. Okay, the type of woman or girl that is a temptation to men, because apparently men can't control themselves, and so you have to dress from head to toe to be covered. Right? You can't let a bit of neck show. Can't let ankles show. Right? I know all of this. I grew up in a religion just like it, where you're being told as a woman that you are a temptation to the brothers. Let's think about what it must be like for the brothers when they're up on the platform and they're looking out into the audience and there's a sister there with a skirt that is, on the knee, ever so salacious and tempting. Been there, done that. When you're told that your existence is a threat to somebody's entire spiritual paradigm. Never mind the fact that when you look at that particular holy text, it says that if you should pull out your own eye. But let's move on from there. Okay? The truth of the matter is that young girls, young women, rules and the fantasy around rules, it offers us some comfort until you get out into the world and you realize actually modesty alone in dressing, grooming alone is not going to protect me and save me from everything that could possibly happen, because it turns out it turns out that you're not safe. You're not necessarily protected. And one of the things I will say is you do see this spike in attention on modesty when women, like I say, when they convert and revert into religions and they want a husband. I'm not saying that's every single one, but I can guarantee you women who have detached, male validation from their own identity, if they go down the route of dressing modestly, they are far quieter and measured about it. It's usually women who are resisting what they really want inside, and women who want to signal in many ways that they are good enough. Choose me. I'll make a good wife. I know how to show a man I respect him. Because women who are doing it for personal reasons, women who are rooted in themselves, they don't feel the need to shout about it. They really don't, because they're not doing it to virtue signal to anybody else, that they are good enough. So here's where the contract breaks, Reality number one is that modesty does not deter predators. Yeah? go and do any research and whatnot. Actual predators, what you're wearing is not the key indicator for them as to whether or not they're going to prey on you. Like I say, people experience abuse, harassment, coercion, assault in their family home at any age. What's a corpse wearing to warrant being violated? What is an old person in an old people's home doing? What are they really doing to attract a predator? What is somebody in a vegetative state doing to attract a predator? It's not what they're wearing. It has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with it. Okay? Reality number 2. Modesty does not guarantee respect. This is a big one, especially for the religious girlies. Because you see, the thing is, you are told that if you're modest, particularly in terms of your dress and grooming, right? A good man will see you, he will choose you, and then you will be experiencing respect in the relationship. That's not always true. Because human beings are imperfect, there's always dysfunction, there's always some chaos, there's always some misunderstanding, there's some imperfection, mistakes are made. And just because you dress modesty, that doesn't deter a man from harming you physically, giving you the silent treatment, being emotionally neglectful, absent, and distant. It doesn't protect you or prevent him from cheating on you. Again, I grew up in a religion where the women are playing the game. They're following the rules. And their husbands treat them the way any man anywhere else would treat them. Because modesty did not guarantee respect in practice, in private. Because we need to get to the truth of this now. Modesty is not going to guarantee that a man treats you with respect, that he cherishes you, that he honors you in private, in word and in deed. It does not guarantee that. Okay, so there are women who've behaved exactly as instructed, and they still experience disrespect, betrayal, coercion, abuse. That is the reality. So what's the modesty doing for you? Okay, reality number 3, modesty does not guarantee a healthy marriage. Sorry to say, this is where we need to get real, because I have seen so many female influencers in particular. They go down this route of, modesty, talking about modesty, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. I heard one influencer even say, when she got engaged, she did a podcast episode and she said, maybe you need to think about why God cannot trust you with a godly man. Yeah. People go into different realms mentally. Right? When they go down this route of piety and modesty, and then they've got a man, and then they're engaged. It doesn't guarantee, and then the relationship pops down. And why? Because humans are imperfect. There's no guarantee. It's not necessarily even a reflection of them. It's just life. But in that state, they're selling this dream to everybody else, to other women specifically, because you see, these messages don't really hit for men. Men they're not obsessed with modesty within themselves. They're obsessed with modesty in women. So there isn't really an industrial complex. There's no money to be made from women telling men to be modest. Yeah, but suddenly they're telling you, well, do you know what? I dressed like this. I changed the way I dressed. I changed the way I was showing up online. I got rid, I rooted out that Jezebel spirit in me. Even though, by the way, that Jezebel spirit has nothing to do with a woman's clothing or her sexuality. But again, they root out the Jezebel in themselves. They're more modest now with their dress and grooming. And then what happens? The marriage isn't necessarily healthy. But you see, when you're modest and you get the partner, now you think that was the formula. But the bit that we aren't talking about often is what's beneath that. Because, by the way, modesty is more than dress and grooming. Modesty is an internal posture. It's an internal posture when you look at what that word actually means. But of course, it's been co-opted, and it's focused usually on controlling and containing women via their bodies and clothing. And the only people it benefits is misogynistic men. That's who it benefits. You see, you choosing to be modest as a woman, as an internal posture, in addition, if you so choose, to your external dressing grooming, that's a personal choice. And because it's a personal choice, it is valuable to you. And if it is connected to a worship of a deity, beautiful for you. If you think it matters to that deity, wonderful. It's okay. But if you think it's going to guarantee you a healthy marriage, a man respecting you, you will be mistaken. You will be mistaken. Okay, because by the way, just because you've been chosen, that's not proof that the advice and the formula was true and worked. And we often get that very confused. It's not true. Okay, there are modest women who are divorced. There are modest women who get abused, who get cheated on, who are unhappy. Yeah, there's plenty of modest women who are playing by all the rules. Meanwhile, their husband, their partner, is enjoying women who are immodest, according to him. Yeah, look at the rates of pornography use. Okay, in men who describe themselves as religious. So on one side, they're telling you that you need to dress in this particular way because that's what a godly woman does. She's modest. But on the other side, they are indulging, immersing themselves in immodesty. Some of them are even spending money. Yeah, they're signing up to all these sites. So they're putting money down to enjoy and indulge in immodest women. But meanwhile, they're telling you showing a bit of neck is a problem. The contradiction, the hypocrisy. That's why you have to know why. One, you need to know what modesty really is if it's something that you subscribe to, but you have to know why you're doing it. And you need to understand it. Those promises that they're promising you are empty. They cannot and will not deliver. They cannot and they will not deliver. All right? And so it's so crucial. The gap between what you're taught and reality. That's the invisible contract there. Okay? Now, I'm not redefining modesty. I'm not anti-modesty either. Okay? What I'm saying is that modesty is not primarily about clothing. It is about self-awareness. It's about context. It's about character. It's about restraint that we choose as adults. Okay? It is about a healthy type of humility. Okay? And the fact of the matter is, by the way, men can also be immodest. And when you look at most of these holy texts, the modesty part is not gendered. We forget that. We skip over that. And we allow men to be immodest, not only in behavior, but also in their clothing. Okay? It's a human internal quality is modesty. All right? And that is the thing that we need to remember. That's the thing that young girls need to be taught about modesty. Now, I talk about modesty, of course, and the invisible contracts around modesty on the Substack. So do go and subscribe to Substack. I talk about it there in far more detail. Until next time, take care.